Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marin Sloan. I'm one of the data and cyber partners at Brody's. And if you've attended our events in the past, this one's a little bit different to usual. So you'll be pleased to hear you're not going to hear too much from me today. But what we're going to do in this series is have a number of experts join us to cover different topics. The next one is coming up at the end of October. Details are on the screen there, where we got a guest speaker from the insurance brokers Lockton. But for today, I'm delighted to be joined by Moe Keir from the Scottish Business Resilience Centre. Moe is an ethical hacker. I'll let him talk a bit more about what that means and what he does. But he's going to talk a bit about what the Scottish Business Resilience Centre is, how it can help your organisation with cyber resilience, a little bit about cybersecurity in the post-pandemic world, and then some tips and tricks for improving your cyber resilience. So Moe will speak for about 20-25 minutes or so, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for some questions. I say please do put them in the Q&A, and I will put them to Moe when we get to the end of his presentation. So without further ado, Moe, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Good afternoon, folks. Yes, I'm Moe. I'm from the Scottish Business Resilience Centre. I should probably get my slides up. And I'm just here to talk a little bit about what we do and some of the things we might be able to offer your organisation, and just talk a bit about sort of the threat landscape in 2021. Can you see my slide okay, just before I kick off?
I can see it, yep.
Fantastic. So, it's 2021. A lot of us have moved over to homework. Sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm an ethical hacker at the SBRC. In case you're wondering what an ethical hacker is, basically we employ all the same tools and techniques that a regular hacker would use, someone who wants to break into your computer and extort you for money, whereas an ethical hacker would charge you up front for the same kind of service. What we're trying to do is find all the vulnerabilities in the system, that be your own, your corporate network, or even you as an individual. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And by letting you know where vulnerabilities lie, you can take proactive steps to protect yourself. So when a bad actor comes along, hopefully you will have already put up a wall around your systems and their life will become a lot harder. So it's 2021. A lot of us have moved over to what we call home working now. I'm sure you guys are aware there was a global pandemic, and a lot of us are now relying on what we call SOHO devices, so small office or home office devices. From an IT perspective, or corporate IT perspective, this is a bit of a nightmare. It's much harder to monitor our networks now, as people are scattered across entire countries, sometimes across entire continents. A lot of people are now remoting in from much further away than ever before. And it's much harder to give out IT support as well, when I'm sure you guys have experienced this yourself. When you have issues at home with your IT, it's no longer a case of the IT guy just being able to walk down to your desk and have a look. Quite often things can take days to resolve. So it's not good from an IT perspective. It's not good from an employee perspective, at least in terms of IT. In terms of our work-life balance, it's probably a lot better. But if you're an attacker, home working is a really good thing. Most hackers probably have been home working from the outset anyway, so their kind of workflows haven't changed, and their targets have become a lot softer as a result of the pandemic. And this is kind of reflected in the year-on-year rise in cybercrime. Now, this statistics here are from the IC3, so these just show what the scale of attacks in America between 2001 and 2020. And as you can see, that year-on-year rise in cybercrime. Now, I remember back in 2016, see where things had leveled off. I went to a talk from a guy who was actually from the FBI, triumphantly saying that they had finally got a lid, or the world had finally got a lid on cybercrime. We'd had almost a decade of being humiliated by cyber criminals, but now resilience was happening, recovery had started, and going forward, everything's going to be great in the world of cyber. But as you can see, by 2018, that had been proved to not be the case at all. Interestingly, it's actually getting worse and worse. There's typically a 15% rise year on year in terms of losses incurred from cybercrime globally. This year, we've seen a 20% rise. And we think that extra 5% or an extra third, of, depending on how you want to measure it, is from the fact that people are working from home. So we've got the perfect storm now. For a start, we've as organizations, we've had to accept what we call greater risk acceptance. All that means is, 2 years ago, of course, we wouldn't countenance the idea of people logging in from their home devices into a corporate network. Now we don't have a choice. As I said, less controlled environments and competing priorities. the shift to work from home has been enormous for a lot of organizations. A lot of money has had to be spent in order to get people just working, and security, which has always been a bit of an afterthought, has continued to be a massive afterthought. It's been more important to get people online than get them on securely, and that's a tale as old as time in the world of IT security. We're not the first thing to be rolled out, and hackers have had time off. They've had time off from their own jobs. I would say that the really serious hackers aren't part-time anyway. They do this as their full-time jobs. But to be an attacker, you need to do a lot of research, like a huge amount of research to keep up to date with the latest tools and techniques. That's true of an ethical hacker as well. I would say I spend about half my day just looking into new techniques, even just scrolling through Twitter, believe it or not, to find out what other people in my industry are doing. And having had many more hours at home has really helped me out. I would say I'm a lot better hacker now than I was this time last year as a result of the amount of time I spent at my desk just reading about stuff and trying things out on my home computer. And worst of all, hackers are less likely to be incarcerated than ever before. These guys are getting better and better and better, and we're not taking them out of circulation. The really big guys now tend to operate out of countries like Venezuela, North Korea, Iran. And in a lot of these countries, they don't really care if their own citizens are attacking foreign entities. In fact, Russian law says that it's only illegal to attack people living in Russia. So they give you carte blanche, essentially. If you're a hacker, you can go after the rest of the world. Unlike in the UK, if you break the Computer Misuse Act, even if you're attacking a target in North Korea, say, that's still a crime in the UK and you can be arrested for it. Many rogue states, in particular North Korea and Iran they actually are propagating a lot of cybercrime themselves, particularly ransomware. If you're wondering how North Korea, a country with almost no GDP and a totally dysfunctional economy, can somehow afford a nuclear program, a huge part of that is revenue raised from ransomware. So when you pay for ransoms, not only are you propagating cybercrime, you may in fact be funding some of the most awful regimes in the world. And it hasn't really helped that while hackers have been running rampant around the world, often sponsored by states or tacitly allowed to continue by other states, the West hasn't really responded in any meaningful way yet. We've pointed a lot of countries and said, look, they're doing bad things, but the repercussions haven't been so serious for them that they have decided to curtail their domestic hacking, which is a big problem. And unfortunately, that means that the only people who can do anything about all these attacks coming in on the West are organizations and people like yourselves. Until our governments really step up and do something meaningful about this, the onus is going to fall on us to protect ourselves. So this is a little bit of a sales pitch. I do apologize. I know nobody likes them. I'll very quickly just talk about how much it would cost to join the SBRC. I'll then talk about some of the services we provide, but these are also services that I think but a load of other organizations provide, and any of them would probably be worth looking into, depending on what your organization does. And then towards the end, I'll talk about some of the things that SBRC do for free. We're a non-profit, we get a lot of government funding, and we offer a lot of things available just to anyone. You don't have to be a member, you don't have to pay anything, just call us up and we can set something up for you. So in terms of our membership packages, we've got a bronze membership level, a silver membership level, and a gold membership level, and you can see the prices there. I'll say if you're interested in cyber, silver membership is the one you'd be looking at. So we would charge you £1,500 a year plus that, but all the training I'm going to talk about now is covered under that, and that's what would become available to you as a member. One of the other nice things about joining the SBRC, I should say, talk about some membership benefits. You get access to the wonderful SBRC app, so you get latest news and alerts about things going on in the world of cyber. We'll put your logo on our website, and in fact, if you go to sbrcenter.co.uk, you can see some of our partners today, a lot of fairly serious organizations that we work with. Probably the biggest bonus to being part of the SBRC is the fact you get the member-only communication. We have we have partnerships with a lot of really serious players in the cyber industry, especially in Scotland, and you'll be able to talk to them, and they circulate a lot of news, a lot of best practices, and you might be able to set some stuff up with them as well. We're also partners with Scottish Police and Scottish Fire, so we offer a bunch of services through them with seconded police officers, seconded fire officers who can come to your organizations and help you with various resilience matters, not just related to cyber. And of course, we give you a discount on all our SBRC events, which I'll just touch on a little bit later. Another nice thing about being a member is our networking opportunities. I've already mentioned the app and business alerts and the logo. We now have a service called Scottish Business Cares, but is specifically designed around helping companies increase their resilience around home working and COVID-19 support. And finally, we have our big flagship events. We have our CISP. Oh, sorry, CISP is not a flagship event. CISP is a partnership, not just SBRC, organizations across the UK. In order to join CISP, you need a sponsor who's already a member of CISP, and it's an information sharing network between NCSC, large organizations, and small organizations where we talk about things that are happening, especially in regards to cyber, what kinds of attacks we're seeing, and what kind of steps can be taken to protect ourselves. The reason it's a closed group is we just don't want bad actors involved. The idea of CISP is to try and stay one step ahead of the attackers and share news in a secure channel. And finally, we have our annual reception at Scottish Parliament, an opportunity to rub shoulders with the great and the good, and have a glass of wine as well. Anyway, let's talk about some of the professional services that SBRC offer. One thing I will say about this, while SBRC do offer them, and of course I'd encourage you to join, lots of other organizations offer these as well. And depending on your organization and what you do, some of these will absolutely be of interest to you. And if you're interested in increasing your cyber resilience as an org, do pay attention to this bit. I'll try and explain what services we offer and why they're beneficial. And from that, hopefully you'll understand what might work for you. These are the big six: our OSINT footprint, phishing exercises, cyber tabletop, vulnerability testing, cyber presentations, and web app testing. And I'll just go through them one by one. Vulnerability testing, some of you may have heard of penetration testing. So that's where an ethical hacker actually comes into your organization, plugs in a laptop, and tries to hack you. Vulnerability testing is almost exactly the same. The big difference there, and I've highlighted it there, a penetration tester will come in, find vulnerabilities in your network, and actually exploit them as proof of concept. With vulnerability testing, we don't do the exploitation. Two reasons for this. One, actually exploiting a vulnerability can be very dangerous to a network. You can end up tipping things over, shutting down servers that are essential. This is fine for large organizations because they tend to have test environments, and I'll say to the penetration testers, yeah, go for it. You can break the testing environment, we don't care. Because SBRC, we're trying to cater to small and medium enterprises, they don't have those test environments in place. So we only do vulnerability assessment to make sure that we can do our testing and your organization can keep running without interruption. What we try and do is identify any threats on your network. So that is insecure devices, insecure services that you might be running, stuff that's out of date. We'll have a look at your printers, make sure that they're set up properly. And it really depends on what kind of organization you are. Obviously, the risks that a school might have very, very differently from the risks of, say, a kilt shop. And those are two of the kind of organizations we might look at. So we try and tailor our testing to make sure that it's appropriate to whatever it is your organization does. Of course, we'll then recommend best practice remedial action for any of the problems that we find. And then finally, we offer an in-person debrief. So about 2 weeks after the test, we'll give you a report. A week to 2 weeks after the test, we'll give you a week or two to actually implement the changes that we recommend, and then we'll come along for a one-on-one debrief where we can talk about any further action you might want to take, or if anything wasn't particularly clear in our reporting, we can explain that. Something that we think is a massive risk, you might not see it as a massive risk, and we can talk about that and decide, who's correct, essentially. We can explain our thinking and you can explain yours, which can be really helpful. Closely related to that is web application testing. It's the same idea. Vulnerability testing is where we come into your office. Web application testing, funnily enough, is where we test your website. And again, it's one of our ethical hackers. We use what's known as the OWASP methodology. Some of you might have heard of the OWASP Top 10. It's an incredibly comprehensive set of tests. We aim for what we call minimum exploitation. So whereas with vulnerability testing, we don't do any exploitation, unfortunately, because of the way websites work. When you communicate with a website, it's a bit like shouting to someone who's on the other side of a river. You say, give me something, and then you wait for them to reply. The only way to prove that a vulnerability exists quite often is to actually exploit it. But we'll do the bare minimum necessary just to prove that the vulnerability exists. And then we'll stop there. We won't aim to tip over your servers or take over any of you, deface your website or take anything over. We want to make sure that your business stays operational and that your customers don't notice that we're doing any testing either. If you have a test environment and that changes, obviously we can do a bit more, but again, it depends on your organization. And then again, we offer that same one-on-one debrief to make sure that that you fully understand what we've written in our report and that we've tested everything that you wanted tested. Coming away from sort of the technical side, we also offer our cyber presentations. This is, again, something that's probably worth doing. If you haven't started training your employees in cyber, then it's something you should really be thinking about. We say that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So too are organizations. When it comes to security, an attacker will just go and rap on every door, every window. They're looking for a weak point. And quite often a weak point in most organizations is their personnel. The way most attackers get into organizations, if you're ever wondering how an attacker breaks into your network, 99% of the time it starts with a phishing email. You find someone in the org who's going to click on a phishing email, click on a link, accidentally download something or visit a dodgy website through that, and that's all an attacker needs to get into your network. So a very small amount of training can go a long way in cutting out 99% of attack attempts. And I do mean that. I've been asking around this year, doing a fair bit of research, and phishing just seems to be the way that attackers do it, get their foot in the door. Cyber awareness training, we can do it on site or we can do it remotely like we're doing today, webinar, whatever works for you, and whenever works for you as well. Just let us know what date, what time, and we'll make sure that we have one of our ethical hackers out there bringing you through the stuff. We also offer executive training, so this is a little bit different. Executives obviously have very little time. So we offer two things, either incredibly short and intense training sessions, or we can offer a series of sessions over a week, depending on the value of the individual. We can even talk to their closest colleagues, their personal assistants, things like that, their family as well, people who might make them vulnerable, and to make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of cybersecurity. We also offer our cyber tabletop exercises. So this is somewhere between the vulnerability testing and the presentation in terms of technical skills. What we'll do is we'll develop a bespoke tabletop exercise for your organization. We'll talk to your IT guys, we'll talk to your engineers, we'll talk to whatever departments you want involved in this tabletop, and we'll come up with a cyber attack scenario. These are usually based on real world attacks that have affected organizations around the world. I can't name names, but we've been working recently with a power company, a large power company. We've developed an attack around what the Russians did to Ukraine a couple of years ago. We've involved the necessary departments of their organization. And what we do is we spend a day where we'll give them a scenario. So things start going wrong. We ask how their engineers, how they'll react to it. We'll see how they talk to other departments to activate help on their end, how they manage communication with customers, with stakeholders. And as the day goes on, we'll ratchet up the tension, we'll give them more and more scenarios. We'll react to whatever they're doing as well. We'll play the attackers. And if they think they can fix something by, say, turning off a server, then we will ratchet up the pressure by doing something else. But again, we want to make sure that all of this is as realistic as possible. And really, it's a test of your cyber preparedness. Most organizations, if you're going to do a cyber tabletop, I would say make sure that you already have an incident response plan in place. And this is a way of testing that to make sure it works. And if there's any deficiencies or any faults with it, those should come out during the day. And you can take steps to make sure that if it ever does happen for real, that your plan should stand up to whatever an attacker might throw at you. Our phishing exercises, these are slightly, these might be less popular, but as I said, 99% of all attacks start with phishing emails. Very simply, we will phish your organization. We'll send out phishing emails to your employees in a variety of formats. We'll see who clicks on them. We'll see if they go to our landing pages, which are generally mocked up websites, to see if they input any credentials. And in that way, we can identify individuals who are most at risk. And of course, this is coupled with post-exercise training, where we can either talk to everyone or talk to the people who did click on links and talk about, hey, this is why it's dangerous. And these are some of the things that you can do, some of the technologies you can employ, like, say, password managers are actually a really good way of avoiding phishing, credential phishing attempts, but we would go more into that on the day. And just to make sure that they are as resilient as they need to be, or at least as resilient as everyone else in the organization. And that should go a long way to cutting down on any potential attacks. And finally, probably our most exciting thing that we offer is for a lot of individuals is our OSINT footprint. So this is where SBRC hackers, they get a week or 2 weeks to go and find out all the information possible on either you or your organization. So what we'll do is we'll go through your social media, we'll go through any personal records, we'll try and get your voting records, we'll try and find out what football teams you support, we'll try and find out where you live, we'll try and find out where your spouse lives, where they work, where your kids go to school, anything that could potentially be found by an attacker that could help them in maybe crafting the perfect phishing email, or maybe even blackmailing you or exploiting you in some other way. We'll let you know what information's out there and what you can do to make sure that it's no longer on the internet. It's probably one of the rarest services that are ever accepted. It is quite a brave thing to undertake as an individual, but more than anything else, it will really open your eyes to how much you might be at risk as an individual. And it tends to make people think about cyber in a totally different way. And I would say that people who have gone through it come out much, much harder to crack as individuals from a hacker's perspective anyway. So that's what we do if you're a member. I'm now going to talk about some of the stuff that we do for everyone. So all these services I'm about to talk about, they are free at the point of use. Just get in contact. You can book it anytime you like. And they're funded by the Scottish Government, in case you're wondering who pays for it. So please, if you're a Scottish organisation and you're interested in increasing your cyber resilience and you don't want to spend a lot of money, this is the section for you. First of all, of course, we offer Exercise in the Box. So this is a partnership between ourselves and NCSC, that's the National Cyber Security Centre, a part of GCHQ, who've come up with a number of tabletop scenarios that we will take you through. We have a number of different scenarios that we offer. Working from home, funnily enough, is the main one. Ransomware, so we'll talk about what would happen if a ransomware attack affected your organization and to make sure that all your employees know what to do and how to react in the right way. And just recently, we've started talking about supply chain attacks, which are arguably probably the biggest threat to most organizations in 2021. We offer these remotely, so basically you just get all your guys to log into a Teams meeting on the day. The sessions last about an hour and a half. Tabletop exercises, they work. Basically, we give you a series of injects every 10 minutes. This has happened, now this has happened. And then your team members discuss how you would expect to react to that. And during that, you'll have an ethical hacker sitting with you who will throw out curveball questions. Your computers go down, you say, okay, we'll down tools, and then your hacker will give you some interesting questions, or some difficult alternative scenarios just to test your people and make sure that they really understand your own incident response plans or your business continuity plans and things like that. And as I said, it's free to all. We also offer an instant response hotline. So if you ever get attacked for real, and if you're going to take anything away from today, please note down that number in bold, 01786 437 472. If you do have a cyber attack during office hours, 9 to 5 weekdays, call that number and we have ethical hackers on hand who can help you through that incident. Depending on what they're able to do really depends on the nature of the incident. It might just be a case of getting police involved. It might be a case of being able to point you towards some resources that might be useful to you, like Crypto Sheriff, things like that. But again, it's someone who has got a degree of training, in fact, a fairly good degree of training now, practice in other cyber incidents. All our guys have gone through a number of cyber incidents now from a number of different organizations, and they can really help you out because when things go wrong, people are liable to panic, and we will try and provide a calming voice and a set of sensible steps that you can take. That's 20 minutes. Sorry, we'll wrap this up soon. And then finally, we have our special events. These are things, again, available to all. We have Scotland Cyber Week, which runs every February, sometimes every April. That's coming up in a couple of months' time. And there's a number of events across Scotland for businesses, schools, individuals, which will teach you the latest things about going on in the world of cyber and some more cyber resilience techniques. And of course, we have the Scottish Cyber Awards, which anyone can come along to, where we celebrate the outstanding achievements in cyber and the Scottish business community. So I'm going to wrap up this presentation with a couple of tips, things that you could do today to really increase your cyber resilience as an organization or an individual. Number one, hopefully will be astoundingly obvious to all of you, update. For the love of God, please just go and update all your devices. Make sure you're running the latest version of Windows, Mac OS, the latest version of all your apps. Most attackers rely on what we call known vulnerabilities, that is to say vulnerabilities that are known. And as soon as a vulnerability becomes known in any piece of software, the developers will go out and release a patch. Keep yourself up to date. It's much more difficult and expensive to hack up-to-date software. The example I love to give is an iPhone 4 that has never been updated. You can buy the tools to take over that remotely over the internet. You can just buy them on the internet or the dark web. They cost about $10,000. Which sounds like a lot, but it's really not. A low-level hacker now makes about $3,500 a month, and they will be investing in tools. $10,000 will buy you a pretty good set of equipment for taking over older iPhones. If you have a current iPhone, those same tools exist, but they cost literally millions of dollars to acquire. By keeping your software up to date, you just make it you just put the ability to hack it out of the hands of most attackers and into really only the hands of governments and things like that, who are unlikely to go after small organizations anyway, we'll hope. And updates only cost you time. Secondly, start thinking about passphrases, not passwords. Length trumps complexity when it comes to cyber attacks. I have a resource there, how secure is my password.net. Go ahead, don't put a real password into it, whatever you do, because we can never be sure who owns it, but go ahead, put in some different passwords, and you will see that a very long password takes literally trillions of years to hack. So think of a passphrase, just combine 4 or 5 words. In my office right now, I have a wooden desk, white ceiling, wooden desk, white ceiling. That could be my passphrase. And I guarantee you that would take trillions of years for a password cracker to break. It's infeasible to crack it, and therefore it's very, very secure. If you're not using these already, please get yourself a password manager. Ideally, you should be using a unique password on every single service that you use. The problem is, if you use the same really good password on all your different websites, that's fine until the engineers make a mistake at that end. I'm sure you guys have heard about these massive data breaches that happen year on year. Passwords or password hashes get leaked. And whenever this happens, there's kind of a feeding frenzy. Hackers will take all of these credentials, they'll take your username and your password for that particular website, and they will put it into every other website they can think of, Gmail, banking accounts, Netflix, whatever, to see if there's any accounts where you've shared those credentials, and they could start to take those over. If you have a unique password on every single website, you protect yourself from that, but of course it's impossible to remember, 20, 30, 40 plus unique passwords. Use a password manager, you only have to remember one secure password, and then you only have to remember one long secure password, and it will store all your passwords for you. They tend to be cloud-based, they have password recovery, and none of the big players and password managers have ever been compromised. They are incredibly safe. And they offer really big prizes for compromising them as well, and so far nobody's been able to do it. Please enable two-factor authentication. It's a little bit annoying. Hackers don't break into your homes. They might have your username, they might have your password. They are not going to have your phone. And that adds that extra level of security to yourself. Sorry, I am aware we're almost out of time. And finally, I am going to click on this link here, haveibeenpwned.com. Find out if you've ever been the victim of a link as well. Haveibeenpwned.com, it's run by a guy called Troy Hunt, who we trust a lot. In the cyber security industry, who works for Microsoft. He's very good. Go to his website, put in your email, and he will tell you if you have ever been the victim of a breach. Sure enough, I have 7 breaches now. It used to be 6. These are all websites where my passwords have been lost. If I was sharing my passwords on any other websites as well, those are now compromised. So I can come to this website, I can see where I've been affected, change those passwords if I need to, and most importantly of all, hit this notify me button here. And the next time there's a major data breach, Troy Hunt will send you an email. You can go change your password on that website and get there before the attackers do. It's a very, very useful thing. Please, I would encourage you to do it today. So that takes me to the end of this presentation. I'd like to thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand back to Martin. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. That was really, really interesting. And it has, having taken part in a number of the NCSC exercises in the box, I can really recommend them to people. They are a great way of just testing how prepared you are and how ready you are. So it's always a good learning exercise when you go through them, having done that. I've got a couple of questions for you. You've got a few more minutes just to go. You mentioned talking about the post-pandemic world, obviously the move to remote working. And I guess a lot of organizations will have deployed technology very, very quickly last March. They would have started doing things that they hadn't done, maybe not gone through the usual levels of diligence before they do that. Do you think there are residual risks there that people might have forgotten about, they've just moved on, and
absolutely,
stuff is still being used?
I would say the big risk is those home networks. So of course, a lot of us, although we're VPNing in, which is a very secure way to get into our organization, that laptop is still physically sitting on a network that will be less secure than a corporate environment. Your router, for instance, have you changed your, those of you sitting at home, if you are sitting at home, have you changed your default password on your router? If not, that's an insecurity. That's not something that would never happen in a corporate device. And something that your corporation can't do for you. You would need to go into your own router and change that. The other problem is you're sitting next to insecure devices. You might, on your network, you'll have old printers that might be less secure and easier to break into, and an attacker would try and pivot through that into your device. Or worst of all, you may have teenagers. And speaking as a former teenage boy, I used to download a lot of dodgy stuff onto my own computer. And at the time, I wouldn't have cared because, if it's my own computer and it goes bad, it's fine, I'll fix it. But if I was to download something like ransomware onto a home network, it would try and spread. And that's the other big concern for me. Keep your own your work device up to date. That will help protect you against that. But again, do be aware that if you're sitting in an insecure network, if you're sitting in a home network, those devices around you need to be brought up to a reasonable level of security as well to protect your main devices.
Another question. So you talked a little bit about SMEs and support that SBRC provides to them. Do you think, I guess some people in SMEs might think that they are not likely to be the victim of an attack because they're not as visible, they're not as high profile. Is that a misguided assumption, or do you
I would say yeah.
SMEs are?
So one of the big things is, like I say, your average hacker sitting out in Venezuela or Bulgaria or Russia, as I said, they make about £3,500 a month, decent wage in the UK, phenomenal wage over there. And they're going after Western targets because just being a business in the UK makes them think that you're going to be richer. You're more likely to have a few £1,000s in your bank account, and you're worth going after as a result. They're not going to bother with third world entities. Their list of targets is a lot smaller. They tend to go for Western nations. And even if you just have £1,000 in your bank account, an attacker, they'll put ransomware on your device. They'll demand £10,000. If you get in contact with them, say, I only have £1,000, I'll say, yeah, fine, give us that. They may or may not unlock your device for you, but they will still go after your network. So just by virtue of the fact that you probably have money.
Yeah. Okay. Another question on passwords. So should we be changing them a lot? Or should we?
Back in the day, yeah, we were advised to change our password every 30 days. The NCSC, National Cybersecurity Centre, have now changed their guidance. What they reckon is you should have one good, long, strong password, ideally 16 plus characters. Aim for 24 characters. With a passphrase, that's really easy. Just combine 4 words and you'll be over 20 characters in no time. And you can keep that for a year, they reckon. Because, as I said, if you have a password that's 16 plus characters long, it can take trillions of years to crack. It's safe to keep that password around for a year, unless it's compromised in some other way. So yeah, one long secure password, and then just keep using it for 12 months, maybe even longer. It should be pretty safe, a hell of a lot safer than using a short password that you change regularly.
Okay. And then just one final question. I suppose what do you think the key risk is for businesses going into 2022? So what is the key thing just now, and what can people do about it?
The big risk is probably supply chain attacks. This was true last year as well. I mean, you can also have a look at the OWASP top 10. That's just been updated for the kinds of attacks that, say, your website might see. But in terms of businesses, supply chain attacks, so that is to say one of your vendors being compromised in some way, and then the attacker trying to propagate up to you through them. So they'll take over the email account of, say, whoever does your printing, your merchandising. They'll send you an email saying, hey, we've had a problem with payments. Could you click on this link to our payment portal and sort it out? Sure enough, one of your employees clicks because they think they trust that person as a vendor that they've talked to before, and that tips them over into some other attack. The reason why it's more dangerous than ever is, of course, we're working from home. It's much harder to verify that who we're talking to is who we really think we're talking to. We're relying a lot more on emails and Teams messages and things like that. We're not seeing people face to face. We're not even talking to them on the phone. We're getting very used to instant messenger, and it's very easy to pretend to be someone else over instant messenger. And we've onboarded a lot more systems to support working from home as well, which has just increased the number of suppliers that we have that we need to talk to. Plus, we're moving over to cloud systems and things like that. We're offloading a lot of things that used to be kept in-house, and our IT guys could have a pretty good eye on it, to other vendors who, at the end of the day, we just can't trust as much as ourselves. So, yeah.
And do you have any tips in terms of how? I mean, obviously, one of the big challenges if you're dealing with a technology vendor is that actually doing your diligence on them for SMEs. Is there any tips you have around technical diligence?
That's the first one. Do your due diligence. Make sure that they have robust cybersecurity practices in place. Make sure they've got something like Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus. That's an accreditation that kind of proves they've thought about security. Ask them for reporting as well. Can we have a look at your cybersecurity report for last year? If they have one, brilliant. That means they're thinking about it. If they don't, that might be a bit of a red flag. And then secondarily, you need to make sure that you have pretty robust policies in place for how you're supposed to communicate. And if you ever get a communication that doesn't follow those policies, that would raise, or that procedure, that should raise a big red flag, because that's more likely to be someone pretending to be that organization. So that's known points of contact, preferred methods of contact as well, whatever portal it is used, it really doesn't matter. Make sure they stick to that. And the kind of information that they should just have access to. If they're asking for things that they should already have themselves, like mailing lists or whatever, that again should raise a big red flag. Why are you asking for this? We gave this to you at the beginning of the contract. As long as that's written down somewhere in the policy, it's very easy for your staff to check. Okay, yeah, they should have access to that. And then they can take an appropriate action, raise that to IT or whatever your organization thinks is appropriate to deal with that issue.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Mo, very much for joining us. I think we're probably at time there. That's been a really useful session. And thank you everyone else for joining us. As I mentioned at the start, the next session we have in this series is on the 28th of October, where we're going to be joined by Vanessa Cathy, who's VP in Global Cyber and Technology at the insurance brokers Lockton, who's going to be talking a bit about cyber insurance, the current trends in the market, and what the insurance brokers, insurers are seeing as key considerations in cyber. What trends are there? What you need to know when you are looking for cyber insurance and managing your risk there. When you leave this webinar, you'll get invited to fill in a quick survey. It's just 5 questions. It should take you less than a minute. We really value the feedback you provide us. So if you can spare that minute, please do fill that in, and we'll take on board feedback as for future events. So I think without further ado, I think that's us done for today. Thank you, Mo, again for joining us. And for those of you that dialed in, thank you very much, and we'll hopefully see you next month for the next event.